SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
No one should have to decide if they can afford life-saving care. Expanding Medicaid would bring billions in federal funding back to our state. It helps stabilize rural hospitals providing critical care. Text BETTER to 46839.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this Hump Day. Please cue the obligatory appropriate music here for us, Rhino. Okay, now, why did they kick out the great Al Green? That's some smooth vocals there. Oh, wait a second. Wrong Al Green. Oh, my gosh. What was he doing with that cane? Golly, if you didn't see it last night, I'm not sure I've ever seen that, honestly, occur in a televised event there on the House floor. Representative Al Green, not to be mistaken with the great Al Green, whose famous tune, Let's Stay Together, we just aired for you. How good is that tune? That's pretty sharp. Well, the different Al Green, folks. He stood and shouted, "You have no mandate to cut Medicaid." He has no mandate. What a goof. But Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, he wasted no time. He issued a warning. He was respectful. And then he finally said, okay, that's enough. Bring in the sergeant at arms and escort the gentleman out of the chamber. And he went like it was a martyr, did he not? And then he gets out there in the hall and says, well, I'm just showing people that we're standing up. And then what about all the Democrats with their little paddles?
Well, I mean, it is fitting because they do go to the highest bidder.
That's true. That's what it looked like, right? A little auctioning paddle there. Me! Sold! Oh, my gosh. Keep it up. Keep it up there, Democrats. I think it was Rashida Tlaib, was it not? She, by the way, folks, no friend of America, nor are the entire cohort of Democrats in attendance, and period, many of whom, of course, boycotted. They were showing their solidarity in opposition to the president. Tlaib, she was so clever, Rhino, because she didn't have a pre-printed paddle. Oh, no. She had her little portable grease board so she could change the message. Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah, and you were so right. You nailed it again. It was 100% about attention. Look at me with my little grease board. Oh, my gosh. And had the dumbest messages on them. At one point, I don't remember the exact subject matter, but the president was discussing taxes. How about at least we see your tax returns? Haven't we litigated that already? Nobody cares there, Representative Tlaib. How about showing for a change something different? That you place and prioritize America and Americans rather than your radical ideology. I just honestly think they played into Republicans' hands with their antics. Now, honestly, Rhino, I thought about this. I expected it to be a lot worse. And here's the reason I think it didn't devolve into more chaos. It's because the speaker kicked out Al Green right off the bat. And I think the rest of them saw, well, I can either get kicked out as a way to kind of show my opposition to what's going on here, or I could just sit here and be halfway behaved, right, and show myself and put my little paddle and my little grease board up.
Well, they also got defanged pretty early on by President Trump. He called them out to their face and called their bluff. He said, doesn't matter what I say, what I do, what accomplishments I tout, they're not going to care. They're not going to clap. They're not going to stand. They're not going to cheer.
Is that so on point? Because what it demonstrates is what we all know. It's about the person and the personality, not the policies. Perhaps the most despicable, disgraceful moment of the evening came when, during his speech to the Congress, President Trump recognized D.J. Daniel, a 13-year-old who was in the gallery, diagnosed with brain cancer in 2018, only given 5 months to live. He was dressed in a police officer uniform. Apparently, he aspires to be an officer one day.
And he's been deputized by several different law enforcement agencies, and it's kind of a cool story because, I mean, he's lived well past his prognosis.
That was so awesome.
He continues to fight. He continues to live on, and he continues to be lionized for his efforts.
And he should be.
Yeah.
That's what we do in this country. But not the Democrats.
No. Well, I think there was one.
Okay. Well, Trump announced that he was officially recognized, made an agent of the United States Secret Service. And a member of the Secret Service, I'm not sure exactly who it was, made his way up to the gallery where he was seated.
The new head?
I think it may be the head, yes, because he would likely be the one in attendance and handling that gesture, of course. And he made his way up there with an official ID. How cool was that? The folding ID, the bifold ID, and handed it to him with his photo on it. And I assume that was his father in attendance with him. Held him up. And at that point, of course, when he let him down after the announcement, after he was told he was officially a member, an agent of the United States Secret Service, he and the head embraced. That may have been the best moment of the whole dang night.
That, or right after President Trump announced the young man's acceptance to West Point.
Oh, that was awesome, too.
DJ walked over and gave him a high five.
That was absolutely awesome, too.
So they both got to share in their exuberance.
And did you see? That's exactly right. That was so cool. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, seated, of course, where the cabinet members were, right in front of the podium. He looked up, gave him the thumbs up. You saw that? And the young man thumbs up back. To the Secretary of Defense, man. How cool is that? Going to West Point. But the point is...
He might catch a little grief at West Point for having a lipper in while he was there in the halls of Congress, but yeah.
That's true. What were the Democrats doing when these just emotional human stories were playing out in the United States
House. I have
House.
some audio of what the reaction was.
That's disgusting. And it's all because of Donald Trump, which just shows you that all this nutty rhetoric, all these false narratives about we truly care for the American people. We're humane. We're fair. We're unselfish.
They're a bunch of puffed up, petulant children.
Horse hockey. You are not. You only care about one thing, and that's your cushy gig. You're enamored with power. So I started thinking back on President Biden's State of the Union addresses. I don't remember any stories where during the State of the Union address they recognize just normal individuals, average everyday Americans that had overcome extraordinary circumstances. Maybe I just don't remember.
Yeah, it's a pretty regular occurrence.
It is, but what I'm saying is that I'm not sure what the purpose was of those various recognitions, and maybe I need to research that. And I started thinking, well, was it somebody who maybe got mispronounced or something like that? I don't know. I just thought that there was more than I can ever remember in the State of the Union address as part of that. Now, in fairness, it was an hour and a half, 40-minute speech. Well, I thought it was fantastic. That just really warmed my heart. It just showed how great America is. Christina Dent and Lisha Adcock are going to be next talking about Kratom. Stay with us.
Virginia.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are live in the Element Well studio. We welcome now Christina Dent, founder and president of End It For Good, and Lisha Adcock, a Kratom user. Christina, Lisha, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so we talked to Dr. Panel yesterday, and then, of course, we had a couple of guests last week that you were accompanied by that came on and talked about Kratom. So their feelings, obviously, and positions on both sides of this issue. And what we're talking specifically about is regulations around this substance. So you were telling me, Christina, before we came on the air, the status of the various measures in the state legislature. Give us an update.
Yeah, so yesterday, Senate Bill 2354 and 2355 both died. They did not pass out of the committees that they needed to continue on, which one of them would have made it Schedule 3, one of them would have made a screening process for that. And the one that is still alive for regulation is House Bill 1077. Authored by Lee Yancey, Representative Lee Yancey. And that one basically defines what Kratom is. It makes it where you have to be 21 to purchase it. There have to be appropriate product labeling. That was an amendment that was just added in committee in the Senate. It bans synthetic kratom, which I think is really a lot of what the controversy is over. And I think there's actually a lot more agreement maybe than we realize on that, because we would agree that synthetic kratom is not what people need to be buying. Youth don't need to be buying it. It doesn't need to be on a random gas station shelf. It does need to be regulated. But we feel like this bill does that in a really kind of common sense way, similar to what we do with other substances, alcohol, tobacco, things like that. We regulate them to reduce harm, but we let adults access them.
Alicia, tell us your story.
Well, in 2009, I was diagnosed with a precancerous tumor on my pancreas, and how they got it, how I found out I have it, I was having lots of kidney stones. Well, that's a lot of pain. It was a lot of pain with the pancreas, and I got hooked on pain pills. You know, they help me get through the day. I do hair, sometimes 8 to 12 hours a day behind a chair. And when you're hurting like that and you still got to make a living, you know, it was just an easy thing for me. 1 = 2, 2 = 3, and so on. So finally just got out of control. The spending was out of control. Then I got on Suboxone, which did help me get off of the pain pills and helped kind of like regulate my life where I wasn't spending so much money. But then I soon became hooked on it, just like the pain pills, and I started having like a lot of weird side effects. Swelling all down my right side of my body. My arms started going numb and all that. Well, I cold turkeyed that. That about killed me. It was awful. And I said I would never go back. I'd never go back to pills. You know, I'd got it whooped, you know. So I did 3 weeks later, and started this whole process again. Well, in the meantime, my husband had found Kratom. He needs a double knee replacement, and he didn't want to get hooked on pain pills. He wanted something that didn't put him out of his senses, that would help the pain. So he kept telling me, you know, hey, this will help you. This will help you, you know, just try it. And I was like, I don't know about that, you know. And then finally one day I did, and it gave me my life back. That's all I know how to say. It's like I was so out of control, my spending, my thought pattern, everything. And when I took the Kratom, it was immediately almost too. I was like, oh my God, the chains have broken off of me. That's what I felt like.
So, Christina, my understanding is that this substance, this product, is available without any restrictions right now.
Correct.
You buy it over the counter in a convenience store or other retailers that sell the product, and it could even be purchased by minors. Do you have issues
Correct.
with that?
Yes, definitely. It shouldn't be able to be purchased by minors. It shouldn't be sold randomly. It should have, I mean, you think about what do you buy when you go into really any store and you buy something that you put in your body? Well, you look at the back of it and you make sure what's actually in it, what are the ingredients, and it has it right there. We don't have that right now with Kratom. It operates in this kind of gray zone, and we want it to be in regulation where we say, no, we're going to tell people what they're getting. We're going to make sure kids can't buy it. We're going to penalize businesses if they sell to people under the age of 21. And that's what House Bill 1077 does, is it brings it into regulation. So I think there's broad agreement that regulation is needed. It's just to what degree that regulation is needed.
Gotcha.
And I think for people like Lisha and many, many Mississippians, there was a brief done in 2020, and they estimated, the doctor who did the brief estimated about 90,000 Mississippians were using Kratom in 2020. I would imagine that's a significant number more now. And about a third of them, a fifth to a third of them, so 20 to 30%, something like that, were using it to curb opioid cravings.
Okay.
From surveys that they did. And so that's 20,000 people that are using it to help keep them off of opioids that for whatever reason were not working for them or causing problems for them.
So we had a guest on yesterday who talked about losing her brother, who got addicted to this and just couldn't stop, and ultimately it ruined his life while he was alive and ultimately took his life. So why do we have these different outcomes like this? We have some people that say, yeah, this has been a lifesaver, and we have some people that report, I lost a loved one as a result of it.
I think it's similar to so I think what we lack sometimes is the nuance on a conversation about something we're unfamiliar with, like Kratom, and we have that nuance for other things. So we know with opioids, lots of people use them non-problematically. Some people become addicted to them. With alcohol, most people use it non-problematically. Some people become addicted to it. All of those things can kill you if you take too much of them. And Kratom is the same way, particularly, I do want to separate synthetic high-potency Kratom from the natural leaf Kratom, because most of the things people are buying in gas stations, these shots that are super high potency, that's not healthy stuff that you're getting. And most people that I've talked to, because I've gotten so many stories from people about this over the last couple of weeks in my inbox, most people say, most people who are using it like Lisha is, say, I would never go into the gas station and buy Kratom. They're not buying whatever random product is over the counter in your gas station. They're getting something that they know where it's coming from. It has been tested. They trust the retailer, that sort of thing. So I think absolutely we have people whose lives have been destroyed as a result of a dependency on Kratom. Maybe that was on synthetic Kratom. But that doesn't mean that Kratom should be banned. We hold these tensions for other substances where we allow people to access them, particularly for a substance that can have that can have benefits for people. And we try to reduce that harm. And I think that's what this bill is trying to do, is trying to reduce the harm to people by saying, we don't want those high potency shots of whatever random stuff people are putting together in a gas station. Let's take that away. Let's allow people to access the pure leaf, low potency kratom for their health, or whatever they want to use it for. Most people use it for their health because it tastes terrible. It's not something people take recreationally for fun. It's not a pleasant experience to take it. And we can help protect people, like the woman yesterday. I listened to that interview yesterday. So heartbreaking. And I hope people hear that. Everyone has compassion for that who's working on this issue, even if we disagree on the types of regulation. No one wants that to happen to anyone, and we want those kinds of regulations that help to protect against that.
Lisha, are you still using kratom?
Yes, sir.
And you use it primarily to alleviate pain?
Well, right now they think that I have trigeminal neuralgia, so that is excruciating pain. So I do take it now for pain, but I was taking it, once it kind of curbed me off of the opiates, I really started taking it for depression, because I think that all just kind of tied into my addiction, the depression, anxiety, and pain that I was having. But it just helps make me feel better. Like, I don't get high from it, but I feel like, okay, I want to get up and get my day started now, if that makes sense. I don't drink coffee, so I always ask people how do they think it compares to coffee, because it's in the same family. And a lot of people tell me that that's kind of what coffee does to you, too. So I just kind of think of it like my coffee in the morning.
Interesting. So, Christina, all these organizations that have signed off on this letter to the Mississippi legislature asking for kratom to be added to Schedule 3, do they have it wrong?
I think so, because one of the interesting things that I'm learning about more people like Lisha in Mississippi who are using kratom, because I've never tried it myself. For a lot of people, they have sent in their stories and they have said, I am working, like, I use my body for work. I work in construction. I work as a truck driver. I can't go to the doctor all the time and get prescriptions. I can't pay for prescribed medications all the time, or they maybe don't work for me. This is something I can afford, and it allows me to work and provide for my family.
I understand.
And I think that's really important, that we don't require people. We do need more research on it. Absolutely. Everybody agrees on that. But we shouldn't require people to go to a doctor in the same way doctors didn't want to be involved in the prescribing of medical marijuana. And we didn't force them to be by Schedule 3 medical marijuana. We said, you know what? Adults can make that decision on their own.
Christina, Lisha, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much, Gerard.
Yep, we're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Oh, man, the Minking boroughs are going crazy. Rhino just sent me one, and it's got Vladimir Zelensky sitting on a bench outside the White House prominently displayed beyond the lawn there in the background. And next to him standing is Representative Al Green from the great state of Texas. And the balloon coming out of Zelensky's mouth said, "Did he kick you out too?" "Yeah." That's so good. You could have a blast with all the memes, could you not? You
and
really
that was
could.
the funny part of Rashida Tlaib and her little whiteboard. I guess she was never told by someone, if you're in public office or speaking in public, don't just hold up a blank thing that people can use to easily meme you.
That's so true.
They can literally put whatever they wanted to say on there.
Or the little paddles, too, right? They had little pre-printed. They had several, depending on whatever you wanted the message to be at that point, right? Oh, my gosh. Would you have ever thought you would see that in the United States Congress? You're thinking about it.
I mean, I don't put anything that's petty and petulant past the Democrats anymore.
Well, you sent me yesterday a video. What was the country?
Serbia.
Their government.
Serbian parliament had a bit of a...
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, what's the... Not hootenanny, but that's close. It was wild.
It reminded me of a fraternity party that got out of control. Food fight. That's what it looked like. That was they're like smoke bombs they were throwing. One of them had one that was emitting red smoke, and she was holding it up high like the Statue of Liberty, and it was just covering the room with red smoke. I mean, and it was like a distinguished sort of looking chamber, much like our House and Senate, where all the members meet. But it had devolved into some craziness. Oh, my gosh. So, if you're watching, by the way, you may notice the little black mark on my head, my forehead. This Ash Wednesday, I am a practicing Catholic, and this is the day after Mardi Gras, of course. A lot of people, Rhino, maybe don't know that the origination of Mardi Gras is blow it out now, because we're fixing to go into a fasting period for Lent and a period of remembrance and repentance, and that's the way Mardi Gras works. And in fact, if you've ever been at New Orleans, I can't remember the name of the very last parade, and they wrap it all up, I mean, at midnight. That's it. And right after that, it goes from craziness, at least publicly, so
on the streets.
On the street.
They have the parade au police come down Bourbon Street. It's just a wall of shields and mounted officers on horses with trucks behind them, just on the siren. Go home.
Yep. And not to mention a parade of street cleaning trucks too, right? Sucking up the trash and cleaning the street.
Well, I mean, that's every night of Mardi Gras.
Well,
after
that's true.
The big parades.
That's
it's
true.
a madhouse of people out there sweeping up as many beads as they can, knowing they're never going to get all of them, because inevitably there are still beads tucked away in corners of everywhere.
That's right.
Still there, probably from the 90s.
Right. So, those of you that aren't Catholic, what the priest says when they make the sign of the cross with the ashes on your forehead is repent and believe in the gospel. That's the simple message. And ashes symbolize that we came from dust, and to dust we shall return. That we're just mere mortals on the planet. There's only one immortal, and that's the Almighty God. So it's just a remembrance. Just keep in mind there, you're just a mortal. Nothing more. Nothing less. You came from dust, and to dust you shall return. By the way, there's some people may be curious as to what the ashes are made of. They're produced from burning the palm fronds from the prior year, Palm Sunday, into this fine ash powder. So it's actually ashes of palms. On Palm Sundays, we distribute palms. And look, my father, the very what's the word I'm looking for? A superstitious Catholic, I guess.
Devout?
Yeah, very devout. I mean, on his knees every night, praying the rosary. But I guess sort of adhering, even more of an adherent than just, being a participant participating, practicing Catholic. When I was a kid, when the storms would come up, like a situation we had yesterday, fortunately, that turned out to be not as big an event as was predicted. Thank God, right?
Although I did see we had at least 2 fatalities due to the storm, sadly.
But right, I saw that. I think in Madison County we had one, right?
I didn't actually see where. I just saw the governor tweet it out yesterday.
Yeah. But my father would take the palm leaves, which were distributed on Palm Sunday, and a lot of people do this, and they tie it into the shape of a cross. And he would literally place that on the window when the storms were coming through. That was kind of his way of saying, protect us, God, from the storms here. Recognize that we believe in you. We have faith in your teachings. But nonetheless, that's what happened. Just wanted to clear that up because I get it. A lot of folks around here that aren't Catholic, I've been asked, I've been out. It's 7 a.m. Mass this morning, and they've asked me, they've said, hey, you got something on your forehead. And so just know that that's the ashes from Ash Wednesday this morning. Okay, it's Lent. We're supposed to fast, and on Fridays what that means, right?
Fish.
Fish time. That's what, when I was a kid playing sports, that's what they called me, a fish eater. Used to be year-round you were supposed to, fast and eat fish on Fridays, but now we only observe that during the Lenten period.
I'm sorry, my brain's still stuck on palms, because whenever I think of palms, I think of Jesus Christ Superstar with the Hosanna, Hosanna coming into town. It's like, it's just a movie playing in my brain.
Well, but that's what Palm Sunday was all about,
oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And
it's just that movie was cheesy.
It was a little weird.
Good music.
I agree.
Cheesy movie.
Right. Let's get to the C-Spire text line. I see we already have someone who is offered this statement. The Republicans did not stand for Biden. I think the nuance of what we were talking about was missing. We weren't talking about Democrats standing for the president. We were talking about the defiance of the Democrats and the lack of interest in standing and cheering for a 13-year-old with brain cancer. My gosh.
Nuance and, well, just the truth and facts are lost on this nitwit.
Unbelievable. So I get it. It's customary for the opposing party to sort of ignore the president of the other party. But when it comes to everyday American citizens in attendance being recognized for extraordinary circumstances, in this case, a kid who was told they had terminal cancer, who has survived it, beat it, and wants to be a law enforcement officer. Man, that's the American dream right there. How could you not stand and cheer for this kid? My gosh. What, Rhino, though, you think about this? What if it was a tranny? Think they'd stand for that?
Oh, yeah.
That's how sick it is.
They'd be in tears. They'd be so exuberant.
It's unbelievable. Oh, they're a hero, right? So we've gotten to the point where, in this country, sadly, masculinity is toxic, but
dudes in dresses
are celebrated in the public square. That right there defines the Democrat Party. Incredible. But I'll never forget that, honestly. And I hope it burns them in the midterms, because that was disgusting. You talk about deplorable? You'd put a picture of that in the dictionary next to the word deplorable. Them sitting down, ignoring, defying, all because they're there in appreciation for Donald Trump. He's so right when he says, it's not me they're after, it's you. He nailed it.
The vast majority of Democrats in D.C. are just vile people.
That was pathetic. Man, it was pathetic. I can't even believe we're part of the same country sometimes. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I could be someone, be someone, be someone.
MidDays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Back in the Element Well studio, that's the great Nicolette Larson. Maybe one of my favorite saxophone riffs there. It's pretty cool. Let's see here on the C Spire text line. This same individual said, find something to pick at, so use the little kids for your talking points.
There's no reaching some people. Or in the words of the great comedian, you can't fix stupid.
That's rich, isn't it? You may call it a talking point. I call it disgraceful. How else
and
do
if
you
this person
describe
had
it?
any shame, they would be ashamed of being in the corner of the Democrats after last night.
Completely agree. Russell in Eupora says, love that song. It's a great tune, isn't it? Her hair was about 6 feet long, wasn't it? Nicolette Larson, great voice. I think she died prematurely, if I'm not mistaken, at a rather young age. What did the Queen Mother Pelosi have in front of her when she was sitting down? I couldn't tell. I don't know. It looked like she was on her phone a bit a couple of times. The camera showed her on the screen there. I don't know. You could tell, though, they're in disarray. Would you agree? I mean, they are absolutely, they're like a skiff in the ocean without a sail or a paddle. What was really bizarre was the rebuttal speech that was delivered by Michigan Senator Slotkin. Now, I'll give it to her on this. Alyssa Slotkin, I believe is her name. Her delivery was pretty good. Her video presence was pretty good. Her message, I ain't got a clue what she was talking about. She was just talking in some abstract, vague fashion. Could you? What was the message there? I didn't get it.
I gave up after about 10 minutes because it was just nonsensical drivel.
I really did try to. I was curious.
Then again, I'm getting to the point now, wherever a Democrat opens their mouth, all I hear is Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. Wah, 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 wah. Because that's about as useful as anything that comes out of their mouth.
You see, part of the problem is she offered no solutions, nothing but criticism. And while I admit we got work to do, there's no doubt. And what I heard last night was a vision. All right, Congress, you got a bunch of work to do, and I'll get to that during the show today. But what she offered was no solutions, no policies, prescriptions, just criticism. This is bad, Trump bad, Trump bad. That's just incredible. And I think all that was an effort to try to woo people back into their camp who have left them. But the reason they left them was because, as we've said on the program, they leaned so hard into this trilogy of climate, race, and gender ideology. It frames their entire existence. And they're trying to figure out, how do we get them back? Well, it's not going well for you because you continue to lean into it. You just voted against their Senator Slotkin, who, by the way, took a walk. You know, she did not vote, talking about the legislation that would have prohibited
dudes in dresses
from competing against girls, which is wildly supported in this country. I mean, it's like 80% or something, isn't it? It just polls off the chart. So who's defiant there? You. You're not listening. You're not paying attention. You're not representing average, everyday, hard-working Americans whom you claim to be the champions of.
They never have.
Never. Their policies are quite the opposite. They harm the very people that they rely on for support who finally said, your policies suck. We ain't voting for you. That's exactly what happened. So by taking a walk, you just showed us your true colors there, Senator. I think 5 of them did, if I'm not mistaken, and the rest of them voted against it. Voted against it. I just can't even comprehend it. Wait, I thought this was the party. You talk about this all the time. Where are the feminists? I thought this was the party who frames themselves as the champions for women.
That's why they were wearing pink.
That's exactly right, including the transgender member. Did you see that? I wonder if folks realize that. Because that person, the camera really never got close. You have to look closely to see. That is
That's a dude in a dress.
Completely. In a pink one. They were all in pink for some crazy reason. What the hell was the reason for that?
They all color coordinate for their stupid messaging, but they were wearing pink because they're fighting for women's rights.
Right, except
for the rights of privacy and keeping crazy dudes out of their locker rooms.
And competing. And by the way, we'll get to it, but next to Melania, right, was the young girl who we've talked about many times, was injured in volleyball. Playing volleyball against a dude. We're coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News. Joel Samey's on at 12:05.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply. And look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Well studio on this
Hump Day.
We're back. They should have pulled Representative Green out by his ponytail. Wouldn't that have been something? Amanda from Pike County says, it was bizarre for sure, but the reaction of the pink pantsuit crowd solidifies the truth that the Dems hate real women and girls and young boys with brain cancer. Man, it sure seemed. TDS is real on the C-Spire text line.
Sadly.
Yeah. Let's see here. Finally, someone on SuperTalk has a guest on their show who can distinguish between gas station kratom and natural kratom. Thank you, and thank you. I want to know, did the Democrats use taxpayer dollars to buy all those little paddles?
Well, you know they didn't fork over for it.
Heck no. I'd like to thank the Democrats for giving the rest of us plenty of material for our memes, says Mary Kay. 601-879-4395. That's the C-Spire text line. William in Tupelo said that, one person died on the trace close to Gluckstadt. I thought it was in Madison. Tree fell on a vehicle.
Yeah, the governor actually just tweeted out an update on that. He said, I want to provide an update on the severe weather that impacted Mississippi yesterday. Tragically, a third fatality has been reported. Please pray for their family during this difficult time. 2 injuries were reported in Madison County and 4 were reported in Wayne County. Damage assessments are currently underway at this time. Initial reports indicate homes damaged and trees down in Madison, Perry, Warren, and Wayne counties. And as of about 10 minutes ago, there are approximately 6,500 power outages across Mississippi, down from a peak of 38,000 shortly thereafter.
Wow. Well, we were fortunate in the south part of the county where I live, not far from where we are right here in the northern part of Hinds County, that the winds weren't that serious. Just a whole bunch of rain, though, man, for about an hour, I guess. I mean, that was torrents. What is the origin of the catfish deal on Friday, says Mike from Madison. It's not catfish, Mike. It's actually just fish. And it's a way to honor the day of Christ's crucifixion by abstaining from meat. That's really it. That's been a tradition.
And the traditional doctrine is that fish is not meat.
That's right. Exactly. then that's it. So for what it's worth, the Catholic faith is just full of symbolism. It's probably more symbolism, I think, perhaps than any other faith, arguably, and that's
I think
one
the
of them.
scientific breakdown of it is cold-blooded and warm-blooded.
Oh, okay.
Because I want to say there was someone who asked a bishop in South America whether iguana was okay.
Oh, wow.
And because they're a lizard and being cold-blooded, I think it was given the go-ahead.
Okay. I didn't even know that. Lucas in Union, I thought Trump's speech last night was fantastic. This version of Trump, in my opinion, is so much better than his first-term version. He seems to be having fun. I agree. I think it's fair to say that he's just more comfortable in the role. And like a typical business person that's used to negotiating big deals, shall we say, he moves at warp speed. And that's unusual for government because government politicians are used to moving at a snail's pace.
Well, I mean, put yourself in his shoes. Try to imagine how you would feel if your opponents threw literally everything they have at you and you still walked away victorious.
He made that point, did he not?
Oh, yeah.
Made that point last night. Perhaps his best zinger of the night involved, it came later on in the speech when he was talking about immigration. And he said, Democrats have just jumped up and down. We need legislation. You blocked legislation. And he said, no, all we needed was a new president. We have laws on the books. We hadn't passed a dang immigration law since he's been in office that I'm aware of. Maybe you could say the Lake and Riley Act, but that didn't have anything to do with border security. That had to do with consequences and penalties and punishment for illegals that commit that kind of crime. And by the way, he did call attention to that. I believe her mother was present, right, last night in the audience. Remember when the Republicans had to implore Joe Biden when he was speaking, which wasn't long after this brutal murder of this beautiful young lady? And he attempted to recognize her and her horrific death, but he mispronounced her name. Remember that? Called her Lincoln Riley. Oh, he's all over it, isn't he? So I think he's just more comfortable, and he's willing to just put his vision out there. The thing I think was missing a little bit that normally presidents do, and this is in no way to be a criticism, is really call on the Congress. Let's enact the agenda here. They got the message without him saying that. Make no mistake. And you saw, in particular, the driver of that, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, flanking him to his left, screen right, shaking his head many times when the president was discussing his various policy vision and priorities. But on deck right now, guys, we just got to be honest about this. Because as inspired and optimistic as I am after last night, and I think that was the main theme, that was the main takeaway to me, Rhino, was optimism. It was so different than the Joe with the scowl on his face and the down whisper crap, that creepy way he talks. That Walter, he's like the dummy for Walter instead of Walter being the dummy for him. But it was so different, such a contrast. It was uplifting. It was optimistic. The golden age of America, restoration of the American dream, that was the theme going into it. And I think he accomplished that goal. No doubt about it. But reality is we need the Congress to act. First up, we're running out of money on March 14th. I mean, the government's funding ceases to exist March 14th. And it looks like we're staged to pass another continuing resolution. Now, this is not a criticism of the Speaker. It's a criticism of the inability of the party to coalesce around this important policy. But it looks like we're staged for another continuing resolution. That just simply means we keep funding government just as it is right now. It is, as the name implies, a continuation of current circumstances. Making no progress there. I don't know how long they'll do that. My guess is they'll do it through the end of the fiscal year, which comes September the 30th of this year. Maybe they'll shorten it to have time to produce a budget using regular order, which is what they should be doing. Now, the framework that House leadership laid out, the measure that they passed a couple of weeks ago now, approaching the 2-week mark, the budget resolution, keep in mind, all this is a template, a blueprint. It goes back to the committees with this blueprint, with explicit figures. We need $4.5 trillion. We're allocating $4.5 trillion for tax cuts. Mainly that involves the extension of the existing Trump tax cuts. We want $1.5 trillion of spending cuts, and we're looking for $880 billion out of the Energy Committee. This still baffles me, that oversees Medicaid. I don't really understand why Medicaid's under that committee, but it is. And so it also includes, at the president's request, extension of the debt ceiling to the tune of $4 trillion for 2 years. That indicates to me our U.S. House expects to continue to produce $2 trillion a year annual deficits. Unacceptable. It's going in the wrong direction. Also, I know there's a lot of excitement around the prospect of exempting tips, overtime, Social Security from federal income taxes. The president, he promoted that policy regularly, consistently on the campaign. On the other side of the break, we'll kind of go through what's involved in that from a legislative perspective. That's something that the Congress would have to enact. We're stepping aside for a break in the Element Wealth studio.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Well, leave it to the Democrats to somehow turn a sincere, emotional moment honoring a child cancer patient with a political talking point. Nicole Wallace over there at MSNBC. Does anybody even watch that crap anymore?
Apparently no.
Says, I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer, but I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump supporters. You believe that? Sadly, you do, right?
Yeah. Because, like I said, I don't put it past anything. I don't put anything past Democrats or their talking head surrogates in mainstream media.
That's so disgusting.
They do not have a bottom on how low they will go and how vile they will show themselves to be.
That was just disgusting. I just got to tell you. I don't even know what to say. I'm so just put out by that ridiculousness.
Well, one thing you can say is that Nicole Wallace is obviously either a sociopath or a full-blown psychopath.
I think you're right.
To be willing to say that, not only in front of just a single solitary soul, but to be willing to say it proudly on national TV, yeah, she's got a couple screws loose and shouldn't have that job today.
I agree. Dems, it says Adam and Baldwin on the ceasefire text line, Dems definitely didn't like it when Trump announced automatic death sentences for anyone who kills a law enforcement officer. Little nuance there. Adam, I agree. They didn't. They objected to that. I think it only applies to illegals, right? Automatic death penalty if they murder a law enforcement officer. Is that the way you understood it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But, yeah, I agree. They're more about protecting the rights of illegals, are they not, than American citizens. Ain't no doubt. Was it taxpayers who paid for all the signs the Dems kept putting up?
Again, I reiterate, do you think any of those selfish blowhards were going to take anything out of their wallet to pay for anything?
Heck no. All right, so back to this budget framework. We laid that out in the last segment. This is the measure that passed the House of Representatives. And it really was, just keep in mind, a framework. Passed by the House, that's the first step. All right, committees, now go draft the details that are guided by this framework and fit within its budgetary parameters. $4.5 trillion of tax cuts. Remember, anytime we discuss these numbers, it's 10 years. Everything is scored and is calculated on the 10-year basis. Just keep that in mind. So $4.5 trillion over 10 years. Now, there's a bunch of math behind the scenes that comes up with that figure. Here's the main point. As we said earlier, the president has expressed a strong interest, and a lot of people are really excited about this, exempting tips, overtime, Social Security wages from federal income tax. The $4.5 trillion framework included in the House resolution is actually a somewhat short of what's needed to just extend the current tax policy. The only way, in fact, it's thought to be about $100 billion short. Now, remember, that's over 10 years, $10 billion a year. That shouldn't be a hard nut to crack. And remember, they could figure out more spending cuts than the $1.5 trillion contemplated in the resolution to get to where they need to be. To pass, extend, even better yet, make permanent the current Trump tax cuts that we're all living by right now. Adding the exemptions for Social Security tips and overtime would require, at this point, either one of two things. You could not pass the full complement of the existing Trump tax cuts. You could eliminate some of the cuts, meaning taxes would rise in those particular situations, to bring in, taxes, exemption for tips, overtime, and Social Security. Or you could go cut more spending, or a combination of the two to make the numbers work. And what we mean by make the numbers work is, in order to pass such legislation in the United States Senate on a simple majority, you got to come within a certain budgetary model that the Senate parliamentarian blesses and says, yep, you can pass this with a simple majority through the reconciliation rules. Now, most calculations show that exempting tips, overtime, Social Security, it's expensive. Anywhere from $300 billion a year or up from there. So that's a fair amount of money that comes through the taxes on those sources of income. And also keep in mind that Social Security taxes on benefits, they're taxed differently than ordinary income. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think the first $25,000 for an individual is exempt, and then you get over that. When you're married, I think it goes to 36.4, something like that. It's in the 30s. If you make less than that, which, by the way, only about 40% of Social Security recipients presently pay taxes on their income, Social Security income, and that's because the average Social Security recipient receives $2,600 a month, and that stays underneath those caps, those thresholds. And then at that point, it's taxed at either 50% or 85%, depending on how much income you have, of the total income is subject to the tax. Not the tax rate on Social Security income, the amount of Social Security income that is subject to ordinary income taxes. Just gets added to any other income you might have. The money collected there actually goes to the Social Security Trust Fund. Trust Fund. So that trust fund is used to pay benefits. So by not paying taxes on Social Security, we're actually just accelerating the point at which Social Security can no longer meet its prescribed obligations. Just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it whatsoever. As a Social Security recipient, I'd welcome that. But there are some aspects of that I just thought you guys might want to know. That's the sausage that's being made. It wouldn't shock me if we don't get a bill out of the House that includes that in it. Wouldn't shock me at all, because that's a tall order. And when the president's saying, hey, don't touch Social Security, don't touch Medicaid, don't touch Medicare, despite the Democrats' best effort last night, you saw that, Rhino. They had Medicaid, Medicare on their little paddles and crap. But the president he's been quite clear. No, we're not touching that. And that does present a budgetary problem, because you're limiting the Congress with respect to cutting costs other than the waste, fraud, and abuse. He made that very clear last night. We want to strip that out of those programs, and I'm all for it, and I think that's great, and I think there's plenty that can be done there. Just keep in mind that while we're stripping wasteful, improper spending, improper payments is the way the CBO describes it, natural, legitimate increases in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are offsetting somewhat. More people are retiring. The cost of health care is going up. Cost of living raises, which are automatic in the Social Security program based on the CPI. All that figures in. People living longer. Fewer people paying in. All that just makes the model just more at risk. Same as our state public employees retirement system. Let's see. True story. As you mentioned, we Catholics used to abstain from eating meat every Friday. When I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, I asked my older brother, why did we have bacon at breakfast on Friday? He told me that was because we offered up to Jesus. I replied, what does Jesus do with all the bacon? CC in Stenatobia says these geniuses basically said Trump was disgusting for honoring a young black cancer survivor, Rachel Maddow, blasted over disgusting take on cancer survivor secret agent face calls to apologize. That's a screenshot from the looks like the Hindustan Times. Hadn't heard of that one that CC sent in. What's up with MSNBC and the host over there? They just can't get over it, no matter what.
They're ate up with Trump derangement syndrome.
So and
they see Donald Trump's face and they go into a fit of rage and they see red.
Also, please notice that this young cancer survivor, in case you didn't notice, is a black person, right? Well, I thought we were all about black people. I thought they claimed to be the champions of minorities. Oh, except if they support Donald Trump, right? Then they're persona non grata and ostracized. I get it. So you're not really about that. You freaking hypocrites. You're just incredible.
If it weren't for double standards, Democrats wouldn't have any standards at all.
You say it all the time, and you're so right. All right, we're stepping aside for a break right now. We're coming right back. We got half an hour in this hour, and then Joel Anand Sami joins us at 12:05.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
Ready here.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Great tune there, Rhino. That's the great B.J. Thomas.
When you hold me in your arms so tight, you let me.
I know I'm hopelessly stuck in the prior decades, primarily the 60s, 70s, and 80s when it comes to music. Is it okay if I say they just don't make it like that anymore?
Well, I mean, they literally don't.
I agree. And I guess this generation, they'll experience the same thing, right? The current young generation, they'll get to the point where the successive generation says, what the heck is that? Although you have to admit, even folks at the younger ages, such as in your age group, they like this kind of music, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's timeless. It's classic. I'm not sure some of the rap, for example, that's being made today, you think it'll go down as like classic and will be enjoyed and listened to?
I mean, I'm sure there will be a handful that stand the test of time. I would imagine a few of those aren't even ones that are really on anybody's radar.
Yeah.
They just kind of go unsung, and then they get used in a project 10 years from now, and all of a sudden they're huge.
Yep.
But that happens with every generation of music, every genre of music. I mean, just look at the jump in interest for the band Led Zeppelin after they were featured in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, a whole new generation going, wow.
What? How many people?
That's a cool song.
Didn't even know who they were, right?
Right.
There's folks that for compensation will go out and do YouTube mainly. Is where you see them. Young people. Often it's couples, and sometimes it's an individual, and they'll feature a classic tune that they've ostensibly at least never listened to, and they'll play it live and record it on YouTube, and they'll react. I think they call them reaction videos, if I'm not mistaken. So, of course, me being a big Journey fan, I love to watch these young folks crank up Journey, and they're astonished. They can't believe it because, wow, someone who actually sings without auto-tune, and they're just always blown away. And I would venture to say they become fans after that.
A lot of times, yeah.
It's kind of cool. Well,
I like finding the ones where it's maybe a musician that performs in a certain genre, like a metalhead that's discovering somebody like Journey, where they just never really listened to Journey, or somebody like Led Zeppelin, and they can hear the influences in their own music they didn't even realize because it was second, third, and fourth hand.
I think that's right. I caught one the other day, one of my favorite bands from the 70s, Ambrosia, considered the yacht rock kind of genre. David Pack on the lead vocals there. I just think they're really talented. I like to watch the videos and listen to their famous hits. But you get the young folks reacting to that, and they're blown away by that as well. Unbelievable harmonies, of course. I can't remember his name, Joseph something or another. I think he's Hispanic bass player that kind of had a fro, which was just so cool for the era. And after his stint there with Ambrosia, he played with Bruce Hornsby in the Range, bass player on a lot of their hits, who was a fantastic keyboardist and vocalist, of course. On the C Spire text line, Randy in Starkville, I think he's referring to our texter that's just like the Democrats, all aggrieved about Donald Trump, said, that sounds like Slim Smith is texting in. You could talk about that, couldn't you, Rhino?
I'd rather not.
I thought Nancy was leaning on an umbrella. Yeah, she was, but I thought I also caught her with her cell phone a couple of times. I watched the Dem response. Oh, gee, if I remember correctly, years ago, the last crew to parade in New Orleans was the crew of Momus. Actually, you just reminded me, I think it's Comus. Help me out on that, Rhino. Look it up. I think it's Comus. And I think the tradition is the king of Comus and the king of Rex meet, because Rex kind of kicks it off, Comus then ends it, and I think they meet for a toast to kind of wind down the day. If I got that right, check it out. Their parade was always on the evening of Mardi Gras and featured the Flambeau Bears. Yeah, they sure did, which are really cool to watch. I watched the Dems' response after the address last night, and after almost every point she tried to make, I found myself sarcastically repeating the same phrase. You mean just like what Joe has done for the last 4 years? She may as well have been giving Joe Biden a campaign speech. Yeah, I agree. After the speech, Rachel Maddow said, yeah, we were just talking about that on MSNBC, that she hoped the cancer patient didn't need any more treatments because Trump has cut out pediatric cancer research money. That's such horse hockey, man. It's so ridiculous. They never think about, well, what about drag queens in Ecuador? Maybe we ought to redirect that money to cancer research for young people in this country. How about that? They don't think about that, do they? Oh, no, that's more important. Got to have drag queens or whatever the hell it is they were doing in Iran, the gender crap. I mean, and Trump actually read a list of that nonsense. I thought that was fantastic. He exposed it for what it was. And they're sitting there thinking, yeah, those are important priorities. We got to fund those. Guarantee you they were. I loved it when President Trump called out Pocahontas. She loved it too. Her reaction was one of, because you're so right. Again, Rhino, it's attention. She knew the camera would be on her. She was shaking her little head, you know. Democrats are only for women's rights when it comes to abortion. Lots of dead legislation. I was about to get to that. Thank you, Ben, from Madison. Yesterday, outside of wine shipments, the legislature has killed most, if not all, popular policy issues. It's crazy we aren't trusted with a ballot initiative process, even though the Constitution mandates it. Okay, so I don't want to go through I told you so here, but Rhino, didn't I say a couple of weeks ago what we can expect is nothing? We got wine. That's the big achievement of the session. I'm still holding out, but not terribly optimistic about any kind of meaningful tax reform policy. But what you should know, folks, is that, once again, school choice legislation, it's not in the dead category, Rhino. It's dead. And the reason it hadn't achieved its third death is because Representative Robertson over there in the House has inserted the necessary code, to take it up in some other bills, in the hopes that they can get to conference and try to push something through. But
what did Miracle Max say in Princess Bride? Mostly dead.
Yeah, mostly dead. So, education, it was 1435. That was probably the high-profile school choice. What was the only thing they could get through the House, and that would allow students to transfer between schools without getting the approval of the home district. Would need approval from the receiving district. It died in the Senate Education Committee. We predicted it. Senator Dennis DeBar, if you're listening, sir, we sure would like to have you on the program. We have, I don't mind saying this, Rhino, we have extended an invitation to him multiple times over multiple years to come on the program and talk about this issue. And thus far, folks, he has declined. He's declined to even respond, I believe, to our request. He hasn't declined the invitation. He's declined to respond.
Makes it seem like he doesn't have a politically palatable answer for our questions. Therefore, he doesn't want to get unelected, so he refuses to even acknowledge our requests.
Correct. So that's gone. The Tim Tebow Act, which would allow homeschool students to participate in public school extracurricular activities after they took state testing and they paid the same fees, activity fees, also died. Dennis DeBar's Senate committee. Man, the DEI in K through 12, House Bill 1193, DEI in K through 12 and post K through 12 schools, it did pass the Senate Universities and Colleges Committee. I felt it would, and it was amended to the language from SB 2515. Now, I haven't checked it out, Rhino, but if you recall, 2515 only applied to higher ed, community colleges and higher ed, the four-year schools. So I'm not sure that the House bill was a bit more robust in that it would have eliminated DEI in the K through 12 education community as well. So I'm not sure where that ended. There's also a University System Efficiency Task Force feature of Senate Bill 2515 that did pass House Judd A. Here's another one that died. I'm sad to report, charter school expansion, which just would have simply allowed the placement, the creation of charter schools in a C-rated district currently under law, only can locate in D or F. You and I think have researched this extensively. Best we could find is we got, 3 districts that are DF. Wilkinson, I believe it's West Bolivar, and Greenville public schools. So that was killed. Man, it's incredible. So we can't. The states around us are enacting robust school choice legislation. In fact, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, in an interview yesterday, the governor of the great state of Arkansas, it was her top priority when she was elected a couple of years ago. And they passed sweeping school choice legislation that phased it in all the way to universal school choice, meaning every student at the K through 12 level in the state of Arkansas has access, I think it's to either 70 or 90% of a good component of the state funding to utilize it as they see fit for their child's education. We can't get even public-to-public transfer in the state of Mississippi. Shame on you, Senate. Coming right back.
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. So there's also, Rhino, a Senate bill. This has been talked about quite a bit. The lieutenant governor's been on this subject for, even in the out-of-session period. The cell phones in schools. This has got national attention. You've seen some schools that, some states, districts that have enacted legislation that implements policies related to at least restricting, if not total prohibition of cell phones and their use by students in the public schools. That died in the House Education and House Accountability, Efficiency, Transparency Committee. Now, I don't think that's because the House is opposed to it. Here's what I think, guys. I think the House is prioritizing. They made it very clear. The Speaker has, who's on with us tomorrow, the tax legislation. And you remember, Rhino, when we discussed many of the Senate bills which were transmitted via, pardon me, I'm looking for the right word, via the Rhino described extravagant procession of the way bills are delivered. Transmitted is the term used down the hall to the other chamber. Well, many of those got double referred. Double referred, if you don't know what that means, it just means that the Speaker, who has the control, just like the Lieutenant Governor does in the Senate, decides legislation both that originates in their chamber and that comes from across the hall, down the hall, which committees to assign it to. That's the first step, is passing a measure out of committee. Then it goes to the floor. If it dies in committee, it doesn't make it to the floor.
I mean, it is constrained by the content of the bill.
It's true. There's some concerns about that. But I'm saying here, though, that I think that with respect to Senate bills, many of them are getting double referred in the House because the House is really trying to push the Senate to get serious about their tax legislation, which has crossed the hall already, the Senate version, the House version. So that also died, and then there was another program. This is something the Lieutenant Governor wanted to do, a Senate bill to provide community college education through some sort of grant. That died in House Appropriations Committee. If they killed HB 849, I hate that they killed HB 849, follow the money. Not sure which one that one is. That's on the C Spire text line. Gerard, until charter schools are allowed statewide, there will be no school choice. We've got a long way to go on that. Mose, I got to tell you, when we started Empower, my good friend Grant Callett, he's been on the program many times. He's really the founder, the CEO. He asked me to serve as the original, honor to do so, chairman of the board. That's back in 2014 when we started this effort in earnest, Bose. We honestly thought, in our vision was that we'd have 75 charter schools in the state right now. We've got 10, I think, because we're restricted to only placing them in D and F districts. And I'll just say that I'm skeptical of the grading process. Is that a fair way to put it there, Rhino? Because
it's a nice way to put it.
Not so long ago, we had quite a large number of D and F districts, but we had a hard time finding organizations that wanted to step up and create a charter school. More importantly, we had a charter school authorizer board that rejected a number of those applications. I called it, at the time, it's not that way anymore, thank God. I called it the Charter School Deauthorizer Board. And I think that was largely because the lieutenant governor, no fan of charter schools whatsoever, I don't remember exactly the number each of the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker have in terms of appointments to that board. But it occurred to me, it appeared to me that some of those members of that board were appointed, in fact, to block the creation of charter schools rather than performing an oversight function to ensure that any applications for new charter schools were of high quality and satisfied all the various standards and thus would be approved for their creation. Let's see what else we got here. We need a true conservative Republican in charge of the Senate. He controls who the chairmen are and where to send potential pills go to die, says Richard. And while I hear what you're saying, Richard, and I'm not going to be argumentative here with you, my friend, don't take it that way. The fundamental problem we have is the lack of consensus on conservative Republican. Would you agree, Rhino? Because
that's part of it.
Okay. Well, I would argue that the lieutenant governor would hold that blocking charter schools and school choice is conservative.
I would argue he's wrong.
I hear you. I agree. But he would say, I'm not in support of so-called public money going to, in the case of charter schools, that's not a private school. That's a public school. It's just that if a student transfers from a public school to the charter school, the money follows them. Thus, the public school to which they are attached based on their address. That's where they're forced to attend school. It's where you live. It's just luck of the draw in that case. You just happen to live in a district and your school doesn't perform well. You want to get out, you can't. So, I think we can't seem to coalesce on what exactly is conservative across so many policy fronts. We're stepping aside as Pink Floyd bumps us out of hour 2 of Middays. SuperTalk News, Fox News coming your way. Then we got Joel from America's Roundtable Radio.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello? You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Natasha Srdoc. She is the co-host of America's Roundtable radio program, co-founder, International Leaders Summit. Natasha, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Gerard. Good afternoon to you and your listeners.
Yeah, so what do you think about this rather chaotic altercation that occurred with Ukraine President Zelensky and United States President Donald Trump in the Oval Office this past Friday? I'm not sure I've ever seen anything quite like that in that room.
Right, exactly. It was bad to watch it. I think for all of us, we felt really bad. The way Zelensky treated American taxpayers and President Trump. And so my take on this is that it was negotiating that went bad. It was the last question that was asked in the Oval Office. And since President Zelensky came to America to sign the agreement, the rules of negotiations are you do not, there's a gambit, you do not ask anything once you agree to sign. Whenever you do that, it's in bad faith, actually. So you don't be surprised if negotiations fall through. But this was done while the entire world was watching. And the problem with that is also that these negotiations are done in such a way between two countries where a mediator has to be perceived as being neutral. Mm-hmm. So meaning you can't take sides, you have to be trusted and to be able to have successful completion of negotiations that both sides are, to a certain point happy. No one's going to be totally satisfied with the outcome. But to get to that point, you have to be really, and basically perceived as being neutral. And President Trump did a wonderful, masterful, negotiating tactics and, bringing Zelensky first to the Oval Office and postponing his talk with President Putin. So he did a lot, actually, for Zelensky, for Ukraine. And it was just unfortunate that Zelensky reacted the way he did, which now it's coming out. He's saying that he's regretting.
Yeah.
He says it was regrettable. And now he's saying he would like to come back.
Yeah, and offered, I would call it, Natasha, a tacit apology. I think he'd do himself a big old favor if he'd just come out and say, I'm sorry. I behaved inappropriately in front of the American people on live television. In the Oval Office, I was disrespectful to Americans and to the American president. If he would just say that, and honestly, to the dignity of the United States White House, if he would just come out and say that, I think it would help him out a lot.
Right, correct. I also think the same. However, I think that because of having a strong support by European leaders, he doesn't seem to be looking that this is something, a requirement that he needs to do. I mean, this is the right thing to do, to apologize to American people, because when you look at the donations and how much American taxpayers, the bill that was paid by American taxpayers is tremendous. And although Europe will say they gave more money in military and humanitarian assistance, all that was actually paid by American taxpayers as well. The fact is that some of that went via loan, so it's going to be paid back to European countries. On the other side, I did a little analysis looking per capita. When you compare European Union, Norway, Iceland, Switzerland that are not part of it, and all of them, how much they contributed to Ukraine, and compared to per capita in America, actually Americans contributed much more. I think 30% more in military and humanitarian aid in dollar value when you compare these continents.
Yeah, I mean the reports that I've read peg the U.S. at about $180 billion, including in-kind donations and aid, if you will, without any strings attached. Whereas, as you point out, Europe's most of their, at least the cash that they've provided, cash aid, is in the form of a loan. I'd also point this out, Natasha, that they continue to procure oil and gas from Russia. They're actually helping Russia fund their war-fighting effort by importing oil and gas from Russia. And to a great extent, that's a result of Joe Biden's policies where he wouldn't let us ship LNG out of Pennsylvania to Europe.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. How could that all happen? And that everybody's watching the same story going on, and nobody's doing anything against it. And actually, another thing is that there are Russian assets that were frozen in certain countries in Europe, and I think that those frozen assets are also going to be used to pay back some of the loans and some of the aid given. On another note, as you mentioned earlier, basically, taking this deal, mineral rights deal, that allows America and Ukraine to develop actually new areas. It's not for current ones where Ukraine government is already making money on, but it's actually developing new areas of mineral rights and rare earth minerals would be a perfect way to get the peace in Ukraine. And I was thinking about the same thing in the Balkans. If there is American presence on the ground through property rights, through American businesses really being present, there's no higher guarantee for peace, because no one is going to dare to attack Americans at that point, because they're going to get it. There will be repercussions.
I hope you're right.
I think that
I hope you're right. I will admit I see Putin as a bit of a wild card. Would he, in fact, be respectful of that? I mean, it would mean his death, likely, and really bad stuff would happen to his country and his countrymen if he dared to continue to attack in Ukraine when America has a significant economic presence there.
Yeah, I think he's aware of it because he doesn't have a chance against the full might of American military.
Yeah.
No chance.
Right.
So he would have to think twice. As long as Ukraine is not part of NATO, he can play with it because not everyone is going to come to defend Ukraine because there's no the fifth the Article 5 of NATO. But with American presence in the country, he wouldn't dare do that. And that's the also issue of these negotiations, that they are going in front of the entire world, and not everything is said, and we can't see what was written. So basically, they have to hide and show. And it's a game because they shouldn't tell too much because it's still negotiating going on. But the way they say it, people need to understand what's behind it. So I believe this economic deal would be the best thing for ending war in Ukraine.
I agree. It's absolutely the best shot. What about your takeaways from last night? Anything in particular impress you?
Yeah, it was wonderful to hear. America is back.
Yeah.
America is back, and it's a golden age. Basically, there's such an optimism, and there's so much hope. Then you read reports about terrorists, which actually dampen it. But even in that area, Trump understands, I believe, that he should keep the threat going and reduce the real tariff rates because it's going to get prices up one way or the other. I mean, either it's going to be absorbed by consumers or it's going to be absorbed by businesses. But in any case, it would reduce the potential of growth. So I believe and hope that the only thing is tariffs that bothers me, or actually I'm concerned about. Otherwise, everything is just perfect. I mean, the way he recognized individuals and also honored families that lost their loved ones, it was touching, it was emotional. And it was also very, very interesting to see that the Democrats did not applaud or agree with anything that President Trump said. And that's really, it's really not fair. It's not right, because we all are Americans, and they also have constituents that believe in many things that President Trump said. So I think that's going to be going actually against them, because constituents are not going to take it, I hope.
Yeah, I hope that's the case as well, because all the polls show that not only was the speech overwhelmingly popular with Americans and resonated with them, but they opposed these crazy policies that the Democrats have latched themselves onto.
Right. I mean, they are against illegal immigration, obviously. Much of Americans are, especially criminals coming to a country, hurting Americans. Fentanyl is a problem. I mean, more and more people understand, even businesses that are hit by tariffs understand we have to deal with fentanyl. And if this is the only way, let's do it. I mean, just even for a period of time until we get to some kind of a norm of getting less fentanyl coming into our country.
Yeah, I agree. Natasha, always good talking to you. Thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gerard. Appreciate it.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Find your Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So one of the things the president talked about last night, Rhino, was power, energy. And he nodded what sounded like his interest in developing geothermal energy. That's not anything new, but it's been expensive. And it's not readily available everywhere, but there are lots of parts of the country where it makes total sense. And so I think this is good news. Now, I don't know how the silly Democrats feel about it. It's 0.4% of total U.S. electricity right now. But one of my big customers was Switch Networks back in the day. And they had their data center operator. You probably never heard of them. And that's because they're more of a co-location facility rather than a cloud services provider. And that simply means that their customers would install their equipment in the customer equipment in the Switch Networks data center. And what they get essentially in that data center is the hardened environment that Switch has built in their facilities that a customer can't honestly replicate on their own premises. So we used to refer to it as the 3 Ps, ping, power, and pipe. That's what you get. If you're curious, guys, go out and look up Switch Networks. There's a couple of videos that provide an overview of their facilities. One in particular is the facility in Reno, Lake Tahoe, up in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, called the Citadel. And it's fascinating. But likely if you're on the internet today, some of your data is traveling through that facility because the apps you're using are provided by companies whose infrastructure is installed in Switch's facilities. And where I'm going is that their massive Citadel facility, and I can't remember, it's like 3 or 4 million square feet of data center in Reno, Lake Tahoe area, does not connect to the electrical grid. They provide all their own power from wind, which you can do in the mountains in Nevada. That's practical. And you don't see it, you don't hear it, you're not dealing with the bird strikes, and you got a pretty constant wind. So you got that, and geothermal, and hydro that they're using, all of which is doable, which is why they picked that area, that Nevada area. So I think this is great. I think you and I both agree. We're in all the above energy, right? Would you agree with that? I'm all the above.
Just not at the expense of the everyday average person for the sake of some nonsensical narrative like the sky is falling.
Right. So,
which is funny that he's now touting geothermal energy because that is well within the wheelhouse of quote-unquote green energy. So what are the left to do with themselves? Do they continue to champion green energy, or do they let Trump derangement syndrome take over and they start now arguing against green energy because Trump likes it?
So, I was talking earlier. Thank you for that point because it made me think of this. Earlier, I was talking about Alyssa Slotkin, the senator from Michigan, who delivered the rebuttal last night. And the thing that occurred to me was that I didn't hear any solutions. So it's always what you can't do, never what we're going to do, unless it involves taking money out of one pocket, skimming off the top, and sending it out the door into another in order to retain power. But during Biden's term, did you ever hear him talk about how to address, in a genuine, practical, viable method, our energy requirements, our growing energy demand? It's just, we're not using fossil fuels. We're killing them. It don't matter what it is. By God, we're not using fossil fuels. But what we heard last night was, we want to explore all forms of energy, including geothermal, because the technology is advancing rapidly there, just like it is with small modular reactors, something you and I have talked about many times. Man, do not ever underestimate the power of human innovation, especially American human innovation. The only thing that can thwart human innovation in America is a stupid government. We just had that for 4 years. And that's why it was a bit of a slap in the face, but I think it was necessary when the president came out and said, we're back. They were fuming over that because it, of course, implies, accurately so, that we'd been lost. We were in the desert. Like I said earlier, the Democrats right now, they're like a pirogue at sea without any navigational devices. That's exactly where they are, and they're struggling to figure out how to respond to this because his remarks, his vision, his policies, wildly popular, including, I believe, with many Democrats. Certainly, that's what the polls show today. Even CBS has said, they had a big poll, it's killing them that they're having to report this, that the approval of last night's remarks, it's killing them. But they never talk about how we can actually solve problems without doing with less. Like your point, I'm all for it as long as it doesn't impose financial hardship or inconvenience. But right now, EVs do. Right now, telling people you can't have natural gas to your house, that's just asinine. That's stupid. Totally stupid.
And clear-cutting forests and other natural wildlife areas just so you can put up a freaking solar farm is not the way to save the planet.
That's dumb. I completely agree. That doesn't mean that I don't see a place for solar as part of the overall energy matrix, but that can be done in a creative, non-disruptive, non-destructive way. That's what Slotkin tried to say last night. We just believe we got to do it in a responsible fashion. Well, what the hell does that mean exactly?
She also praised George Bush and Ronald Reagan without realizing the party she belongs to demonized them as if they were Hitler, just like they demonized Trump as if he were Hitler.
That's so true. What are we getting for our money from the legislature on the 662? Again, all I can tell you guys is, and I don't want to beat this horse, but I think it just bears repeating, is there's no consensus on what the Republican platform is, and I'm using Republican because they do control all the levers of government and lawmaking, but we can't seem to coalesce around a number of issues, as we just pointed out, with all the various measures that failed, mainly in the Senate, of course. It's House bills that get transmitted via the aptly described procession by Rhino down the hall to the Senate and then just end up in committees where they die. Mobile sports betting, you saw the status of that. Looks like that ain't going to make it either. Now, apparently in the House, just like they did with school choice, they've pulled forward some of that code to hopefully get into committee and some other bills. But at this point, Senator David Blunt, the Democrat from the Byram area, I know he was on Scott Friday, he said very clear, I'm opposed to it. Senator David DeBar, Republican from the coast who chairs education, he opposes all forms of school choice. And I know that folks think, well, dang, the president supports it. And he appointed Linda McMahon, who got confirmed to be the education secretary, who said earlier, yeah, I'm trying to work myself out of a job. And the president mentioned that again last night. Imagine that. That's the difference between a career bureaucrat and a business person, a successful business person, in this case two, who are now offering their services to the people. And Linda McMahon says, yeah, as quick as I can, I want to get out of this thing so we don't have a federal Department of Education. Brilliant. Love it. As opposed to appointing career bureaucrats, faceless bureaucrats, typically, that are all about as much as they can siphon off the government. Unbelievable. How long do we in Wilkinson County have to put up with an F school district? Thanks, Andrew. So this is what I'd recommend to you guys. I'm telling you, the superintendents in the school districts across this state, school board members, again, they may be the group that contacts the legislators more than any other segmented group, more than any other cohort. And they're pushing hard against any sort of education freedom. If you really want to move that needle, guys,
you got to drown out those voices.
Yeah.
You got to outnumber them.
I would suggest go to a school board meeting. Get their take on it. Find out how they feel. The members you guys elected to be on those school boards, and get their take and express to them your feelings about that. Go to those superintendents. By the way, if you live in those districts, you're paying property taxes, you're paying the salaries for those administrators and superintendents.
Probably don't want to start the conversation with that, but
sure,
that's
I get
definitely
it.
a zinger you can fling on your way out the door.
Well, if you don't get the answer you're looking for, that's at that point you invoke that,
yeah,
right?
they deserve it at that point.
Yeah. We're stepping aside for a break and half an hour left on Middays. Got some more text to get to. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Ernestine from Biloxi says, Gerard, did I understand these tariffs go into effect later this week at Walmart, the Target store, so the price we will be charged just went up too. Is this correct? It is. In general, there will be a number of grocery products that you will find more expensive at the grocery store. In particular, produce. A lot of produce comes from Mexico. And this Thursday, retailers are scheduled to increase the price of grocery products. Now, keep this in mind. It takes a while for that to trickle through. There's also been some reports that anticipating tariffs to the extent you could. Fresh produce is a little more difficult, but a lot of products that were subject to the tariffs that went into effect yesterday were sort of pre-purchased, and that's expected to have an impact on GDP because companies kind of loaded up on those products at a lower price before the tariffs went into effect. Mexico and Canada supplied 51% and 2% respectively of fresh fruit imports, 69%, 26% respectively of fresh vegetable imports. That's according to the United States Department of Agriculture. Strawberries, raspberries, avocados, tomatoes, those are big imports from Mexico. Meat, animal products in general, those actually come from this country, some from Canada. So, yeah, you can expect it. Now, keep in mind, the president said last night there's going to be a disturbance, is the term he used to describe. What he was trying to say is, in the short term, expecting that we get some resolution to these trade wars, which is the goal of the tariffs imposed. In the short term, you're going to see prices go up on a lot of stuff. Vehicles, lumber, certainly produce, food. You're going to see that. He calls it a disturbance, and I think he was trying to prepare the nation for that likelihood. So get ready. I never thought I'd see the Mississippi State Senate do what's in their best interest instead of the people's interest. I haven't since the Democrats had total control of both branches, says Tim and McGee. How many situations are there like this in Mississippi, says Louie from 662, talking about the school choice issue, specifically, he's discussing the portability matter that would have been enacted into law had the Senate seen fit to pass it. That would be Representative Jansen Owen's bill out of the House that would have allowed a student anywhere in Mississippi to transfer from their home school based on their address to their school of choice, where the home school could not block it. The school of choice would have to agree to admit them, and they would be required also to develop capacity calculations and a capacity standard that they would have to submit to the legislature every year, including a report of their open seats so that the legislature could monitor whether or not they're being honest when they reject an application for enrollment from a person outside of their district, a student outside of their district. Bottom line is that legislation did not make it through committee, Senator Dennis DeBar's Education Committee. But Louis says the Lafayette County line is about 3 miles from Water Valley High School in Yalobusha County. Thus, a student 3.1 miles from Water Valley High School has to travel over 15 miles to attend Lafayette County High School. How much money could be saved on school bus travel expenses if those kids could attend the closer school? And I hear you, Louis, and I agree. What they would argue is that, yeah, but if we lost a student, we'd lose $6,900 a year of state funding associated with that student to attend the Lafayette County School. That's the pushback. But honestly, I'm just going to be honest, Rhino, you and I talked about it on the break. I don't feel like I can hide it anymore and veil it anymore, disguise it anymore. This is about race. I'm convinced of it. Now, folks may argue otherwise, and I think that what makes stuff like this so hard, the school choice issue, so hard in Mississippi, is that from a racial composition perspective of our total population, we're fairly evenly balanced. The difference is not significant. The way it is in other states which have enacted school choice. Now, there are people out there that are hearing me right now that would say you're totally wrong, and that's fine. I respect them for that. It's just my opinion. And you can disagree with it. That's what makes the world go round. I completely agree. Larry in Mize says, do you think Trump could balance a budget with tariffs and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse? I don't, Larry. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you there. If that were the case, he wouldn't have requested to increase the debt ceiling by $2 trillion per year over the next 2, meaning that they believe they're going to produce $2 trillion deficits. That's a long way from balancing the budget. I think there is sufficient waste, fraud, and abuse that can be eliminated to offset, like I said earlier, natural, organic, legitimate increases in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and debt interest in veterans benefits and some of those other programs, ACA subsidies, which ain't going away. All of that's part of statutory, mandatory spending. The Earned Income Tax Credit, Rhino, which is something the president fully supports. The child tax credit, by the way. All that is statutory, and that ain't going away. And so the Congress doesn't even touch that until we get into those spending objects. We got no chance of balancing the budget. I've shared that math a million times. You guys don't want to hear it anymore. But if the Congress right now appropriated zero to all the rest of the budget, still have a $500 billion deficit. And we're not going to just shut down the United States military. That's what that would require. So we got a long way to go. I applaud all the efforts of exposing the outrageous spending and waste, fraud, and abuse. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be sufficient to balance the budget. By the way, tariffs. Keep in mind, who pays tariffs? American companies. American importers pay tariffs. I think it's largely believed that foreign countries pay tariffs. They do not. American companies which import goods across the border, that's who pays tariffs. If we, and by the way, under the president's first term, the total amount of tariffs collected, $86 billion. That's a lot of money, but when you think about over 4 years, when, let's see, I'm just doing the math, we spent about $14 trillion. That's not even petty cash. By the way, those same tariffs remained in place because they were primarily imposed on China. I don't think Joe Biden knew it, but they remained in place during the Biden administration. Actually collected more under Joe Biden than we did under President Trump. And that's mainly because they were only in effect for, I think, around 3 years, Rhino, under the President Trump, whereas they continued for the full 4 years. May have been about 2.5, because it's about half of what was produced. It was $150 billion over 4 years under President Biden. And again, when your budget's $7 trillion, that doesn't go very far. If we wanted to replace the income tax, the personal income tax, which has been something that the president suggested, you guys know he loves tariffs. We import about $4 trillion a year. We pay about $2.6 trillion of federal income tax. So we would literally have to have 70% tariffs just to replace the current income tax, and that assumes we continue to import at the same rate. Remember, the goal is to induce companies, American companies, that make their stuff abroad to make it here. And if they did that, we wouldn't collect any tariffs. So if we achieved the actual goal, we wouldn't have any revenue if we relied on tariffs. The goal being all manufacturing that is in place from American manufacturers would return to this country. That's the goal. I totally support that. And remember also, the president has suggested, why don't we cut the corporate tax rate for those who make their stuff here in this country to 15%. I think it's a great idea. I really do. And I do think that could induce American companies who honestly locate to a great extent for the lower tax rates. Ireland is one that's got a lot of high-tech manufacturing because their patent laws are very similar to this country's, but also they either have no corporate income tax rate, Rhino, or extremely low corporate income tax rate. Ireland does. I'd love to see those companies relocate to the United States. And a 15% corporate tax rate could be the trick to do that. We got one more segment coming up on Middays. Please stay with us.
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Final segment of Midday. So yesterday, we heard from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who said that he thought we may actually be able to work out a deal on the tariffs as early as today, that the president was considering exempting certain industries, and that would include automakers.
Yeah, that's already come out this morning.
All right, so it looks like that went into effect, right? So the 25% duties on Canada and Mexico remain in place, but American-based auto manufacturers that produce their vehicles, manufacture their vehicles in Canada and Mexico would be exempt from the tariffs for the time being, as long as their cars are compliant with the USMCA standards that were implemented in the first Trump administration. So I think that's good news as far as the tariffs not affecting the price of vehicles. Whether or not this achieves the president's goal of I guess, leveling the so-called playing field, hard to say at this point, with our neighboring countries that he believes are really putting the wood to us, and I tend to agree. Mo says the most cost-effective way to shop is to buy American products. Maybe time to stop buying some items that are from other countries. I'd say two things to that, Mo. How do you tell? It's not readily evident. Some are labeled, some aren't. Second thing is, there's a lot of stuff we don't make that we can only get from abroad. And when you think about buying American cars, just remember, many of them are assembled or manufactured in other countries. So you may be buying American, but you're buying an American car made elsewhere, which is subject to the tariffs. Greg in Newton says, to start with, I don't bet on ball games. Nothing against it, but it's just something I don't do. Mobile sports betting being passed in Mississippi seems to be getting into the pockets of some people if it's made law, just like the ones that fought the lottery so hard. Follow the money always. What do you mean follow the money, Greg? Because
talking about the people that oppose it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I think the reason people
Who
in this
makes donations to the people that oppose it?
Well,
Could it be anybody from
the casinos are the main ones pushing back, but there's some who embrace it. Now, the way the bill is structured, those companies who provide the mobile sports betting would have to partner with a casino, so all the revenue would flow through them, and it would be subject to the same gaming tax that casino revenues are. But the government wouldn't get involved in that relationship. You mobile sports betting companies, you just pick out whoever you want to partner with. That's what the Democrats found objectionable, by the way. They wanted to distribute it evenly
across. Of course they do.
Right.
Everything they think is stupid.
Right. So, yeah, I hear you, Greg. You know, my response always to people who oppose the lottery and gaming and sports betting on the basis that, well, it just appeals to lower income folks. It's a tax on the poor. You hear that refrain all the time. I would just say it's not the government's responsibility to protect people in how they spend their money, to dictate it to them. If they don't spend it on that, they'll find something else they don't need to be spending it on, and I don't want the government in their pocketbook. But I hear you, Greg. I do think that there are outside forces who are influencing this, and that's why we can't get it through. Sometimes things are labeled, assembled in the USA, and you can't tell if that is code for something else, says Ray and Gluckstadt. Interesting. Andy says, talking about school choice, I know he's a big proponent of education freedom, says, let's just call it like it is. The argument boils down to race. 2 examples. Public schools in Madison County don't want to have kids coming in from Jackson Public Schools. I would argue also, Andy, that's true in the neighboring Rankin County and the Clinton Public Schools, which are in Hinds County. Madison County also has concerns about the Canton Public Schools in the northern part of the county, which don't perform well. They'd like to go to the Madison County schools in the south part of the county. The other end is schools like Okolona, for that matter, are worried that they would lose high-performing students, the one actually trying to learn, to nearby better or private schools. The current system traps kids in schools that for years and years, no matter the funding, fails kids each and every year. Now, what do those examples have in common? Majority black. In the end, a lot of these kids are trapped in bad school districts or black children, and their parents desperately looking for a better path. Amen, Andy. Absolutely agree. Let's see. Jason in Starkville says they can spend it on Kratom. As long as we can do Kratom from the couch, no need to legalize sports betting. Oh, geez. On the C-Spire text line, 100%. It's about race. I really think that leaders are scared of changes. That's always part of the problem. What they're scared of is, as they like to say around the Capitol, as Rhino knows, getting their picture taken off the wall. That's what they're scared of, protecting that cushy gig. Let's see here. CNN doesn't get it, says Ricky in Aberdeen. CNN, the Republican-heavy audience that tuned in to hear President Donald Trump's speech on Tuesday, greeted it with tempered positivity, according to a CNN poll. Oh, my gosh. You're right, though, Ricky. No doubt about it. Man, they've been shocked into reality a bit, and they don't know how to react. We're out of here today. We appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow. We got Speaker of the House, Jason White, on. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
Ford of Corinth has trucks built Ford tough with powerful engines and rugged exteriors. Whether you're hauling cargo, towing a trailer, or just need a reliable daily driver, Ford of Corinth has the truck for you, which includes a lifetime powertrain warranty. FordofCorinth.com.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.